Hello, receiving teachers, receiving students, and 7Es. Thank you. You may be seated. Okay, in front of you, you should have your blank papers with your names written on them. And your title on that blank paper should be Recapping Exercises. So you should have recapping exercises numbers 1 to 6. So we are going to be recapping on your previous lesson. You learned some important concepts and skills. And I hope you still remember what you have learned, because today we are going to go through at least some as recapping exercise just to bring our thoughts into our lesson for today. So we will now go through number 1 question. I'd like you to listen very carefully. Okay, the first question reads, what is pi? What is pi? P-I. What is pi? At least a word, short sentence that you can still remember the meaning of the word pi. It can be written as in numbers also. To the receiving students and teacher, we are now on our first recapping exercise. And the question is, what is pi? What is the meaning of the word pi? If you have finished, sit up straight. You shouldn't be talking to your friends. You write down your own answers. When you tell your friends won't learn anything. They should be remembering from what you have learned. Okay, let's move on to number 2. What is the symbol for pi? What is the symbol for pi? Pi has got a symbol. I'd like you to write down that symbol. What is the symbol for pi? We shouldn't be copying. Keep your eyes to your own paper. You were given a paper each. You write on your own paper. Think for yourself. Okay, we'll now move on to number 3. The symbol pi, or the symbol here, is a letter from which alphabet? I know you went through some history with Mr. Dumo, so you should remember where does that symbol come from, which country's alphabet. Just give me the name of the country. If you have finished, you sit up straight. Number 4. What is the value of pi as a fraction? Pi can be written as a fraction. It has its own value. You can still remember, pi has a value and it can be written as a fraction. I would like you to write that fraction down. Just write me the answer down, or the fraction down. Number 5. What is the value of pi as in decimal? Pi can be written as a fraction and also as a decimal. Now I would like you to write it down as a decimal. I can hear people talking. This is not discussion time. You should be just answering my questions. I will be the one marking your papers. Number 6. On the whiteboard here, I have the formula C over D. I'd like you to write the names given for these two initials or two letters. What does C stands for and what does D stands for? Quickly on your blank sheet of paper, I'd like you to write me the meaning of those two letters. You learned this in your previous lesson. You should know the full names. As soon as you finish, I'd like you to face your papers down. Okay, pass all your papers up now quickly to the person sitting up front. I'd like you to pass all your papers up. Make sure your names are written on. I will be marking your 6 answers to those 6 quiz questions. So quickly pass those papers up. Make sure those papers are face down. Pass them up. Only one person up the front should be holding on to your paper. Quickly. If you haven't finished, that's the result of not being studying or not doing your homework or your exercises. So I'd like you to pass those papers up. Quickly. If I don't collect your paper, you are going to mark your own work. Any papers that come after this, I'm not collecting them. Quickly. Have I collected all the papers? Come on, 7s. You got to be quick. Some of us are not following instructions. Quickly. That's okay. Okay, I've collected most of the papers. We will now move on to our lesson topic for today. So I'd like everyone to fold your arms and sit up straight. There shouldn't be any writing, 7s. Seven is from the PowerPoint. Now, what do we have for our lesson for today?
Circumference of a circle.
The circumference of a circle. You have started on this lesson topic in your previous lesson. Today, we are going to go deeply again into previous lesson. There were formulas that you learned. And the formula is calculating pi, which is circumference over diameter. Okay, students? From your previous lesson, you learned something on, or you learned a formula as the formula for calculating pi, which is C over D, circumference over the diameter. We will try to make this C as the subject in order to, from the topic it says circumference of a circle, we will try to calculate the circumference of a circle. So I'd like you to look up on the PowerPoint and see how we can go about that. Okay, all eyes on the PowerPoint. Formula. From your previous formula, you learned this formula here. Pi equals C over D. Am I correct? I hope we still remember. We will now make C the subject. C will come in place of this symbol here. Are we following? Okay, the first step here is looking up on the whiteboard. Here we have the formula pi equals C over D. We are dividing by D. The opposite of dividing, we are going to multiply. So you can see from the arrow here, in order to make C the subject, we multiply pi and D. Also on this side, we have to multiply it by D. So the D cancels out, and this is what you should have. C is equals to pi times D. We are trying to make C the subject because we are going to be using this formula here to calculate the circumference. C is in place of the word circumference. So you should have the formula written as C is equals to pi D, or C is equals to 2 pi r. In this case here, you will see C is equals to pi D if the diameter is given from the circle. Are we following? If the diameter is given from the circle, I hope you still remember where do we read the diameter from the circle. It is from one end of the circle to another end. That is the diameter. Circumference equals 2 pi r. R here represents what? Radius. If the radius is given on your circle, you use this formula. There are 2 radius in a circle. Diameter, it's a complete line from one end to another. Radius is just from one end to the center. Are we following? So here now we have changed the formula C is equals to, or pi is equals to C over D into this formula here. So these are the formulas that we are going to be using for our lesson for today. Okay, we have one learning activity to go through together, just for you to see a clear picture what we meant by using these 2 formulas. Okay, it says calculate the circumference of this circle when the diameter is given. Okay, here we have the diameter given as how many centimeter? 10 centimeter. This is the diameter. The formula to use is C is equals to pi D. Pi is written as 3.14. I've asked you a question, what is the value of pi as in decimal? This is what you should have written on your paper. Times the diameter, which is 10. Okay, we are multiplying by 10. We are moving 1 decimal place to our right. My answer is 31.4. Therefore, circumference is 31.4 centimeter. This is the formula to use when you see from your circle diameter is given. The next one, it says calculate the circumference of this circle when the radius is given. Here, class, which formula we are going to be using? C is equals to 2 pi r. Again, C is equals to 2 pi r. My radius here is 6 centimeter. Okay, looking at it, how it can be calculated. 2 times pi, 3.14 times 6, the radius. And the final answer is 37.68. Therefore, circumference is 37.68. Can you see the difference between the two circles? Yes. The diameter and also the radius. And also the two different formulas that you are going to be using, they are not different. You're still using them to calculate the circumference. It's only that if the diameter is given, you use C is equals to pi d, and if the radius is given, you use C is equals to 2 pi r. Okay, there is also one here. I've asked you to write me the value of pi as in fraction. C is equals to pi d. Value of pi as in fraction is 22 over 7 times 14 if the diameter of a circle is 14. Here I'm still using pi d, but given as a fraction. Are we following? 7 is. So I simplify. 7 into 7 goes 1. 7 into 14 goes 2 times. So I have 22 times 2 equals 44. Therefore, the circumference is 44 centimeter. There is an exercise in your student workbook that you are going to be using this value here. So that is why I'm just showing you one learning activity that you can follow. Any questions before we go on to the actual exercise? Are we clear on what to do 7 is? Okay, good. You have exercise 1 now on the screen. It says, calculate the circumference of each of these circles using pi 3.14. You are using the value of pi given as in decimal. Remember, the diameter is given. You can refer back to the working out in your student workbook. Okay, from the screen, I have it as 8 centimeter. In your exercise book, it is 8 millimeters. So I'd like you to concentrate on the one that I have on the PowerPoint. 7 is just a reminder. I'd like you to show your working out in your student workbook so that I know which formulas you are using. You have examples in your student workbook that you can use as a guide. Unless you are completely not sure on what to do, you raise your hand for assistance. You should be finished by now. I'd like you to move on to exercise number 2. Calculate the circumference of each of these circles using pi 3.14. This time, look at the circles very carefully. The radius is given. I'd like you to write down the formula that you are going to be using to calculate the circumference of these two circles. A, the radius is 10 centimeter. B, the radius is 2 centimeters. I repeat, so all working out on your student workbook, because I'll be collecting your books to check through that. I don't want to see only answers. Numbers are written, but there are figures or letters that are represented by those numbers that you write. Do write the formula down. And this will help you to study as you go along. When you have a test, you have something to study through. We cannot just write figures down. There is always a formula. Either C is equals to pi d or C is equals to 2 pi r. These are the two formulas that I've been asking you to write down first before you go on to slotting in the figures or substituting the figures into the two formulas. Some of us are just writing the numbers down. we should be finishing those 2 exercises, exercise B by now. I will be collecting your books for marking, and in our next lesson we will go through the 4 answers to those exercises as our recapping activity. So if you are still confused on how to work them out, you are given this time till the next lesson to correctly come up with the working out to those 4 exercises. So 7 is, I hope you have completed the 2 exercises for number 2. All sitting up straight now. 7 is, we will go through the summary for the lesson for today together on from the PowerPoint. 7 is, the circumference of a circle is given by the formula. I hope we are watching. 7 is, C is equals to pi d, or C is equals to 2 pi r, where d is the diameter and r is the radius. So that is our summary point for today. Key phrase, circumference of a circle. Next lesson topic, solving problems involving circumference or circular objects or cylindrical shapes. Materials needed to the receiving teacher, calculators, biros, pencils, and papers. So 7 is, I hope you have taken note of what materials that you would be needing for our next lesson. With that, 7 is, and receiving students and teachers, we have come to the end of our lesson. Thank you for your participation. Thank you. You may be seated.